finally home from work, but unfortunately, it's only a Tuesday. But fortunately, though, it is arm day as well. Little rescheduling of my workout program. Normally Tuesdays is chest day, but I haven't done an arm day video in a while, so I might as well make one. After this, I'm going to do a leg day on Friday. I mean, I'm going to have other workouts in between, but the next video following this one is going to be a leg day because I know I haven't done a leg video in a dog's age. It's just harder to get comfortable recording leg day because, as like everyone knows, I do not like getting other people in my shot because I care about everyone else's privacy. Outside of that, though, we're still celebrating Christian Girl Autumn. I have plenty of pumpkin spice.
Some good fucking food.
And I even just got, this was on sale. It seems a lot of the autumn stuff is already going on sale a little earlier than I was expecting.
It doesn't matter!
But they had this Dunkin' pumpkin spice only for a few bucks. So I grabbed a thing of that. I'm also out of coffee anyway, so I need the replacement. Like my new haircut, by the way.
For naturally beautiful hair.
I like it. I think it looks pretty good. But anyway, like I said, it's arm day.
Is the pump.
And then I still have to go out and get food.
High quality, chicken flavored foodstuffs.
So that's gonna be fun. This is even one of those situations of we have food at home type things. It's like, nah, I still gotta go out and get something to eat.
Foodstuffs.
Anyway, let me get this pre-workout made. We'll run to the fitness center and we'll get that arm pump in. As we all know, Christian Girl Autumn also falls in line with Halloween season, as we have already discussed. And another Halloween tradition of mine that I have, you know what, this is actually kind of a yearly thing already, but I like watching scary videos on the internet. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean haunted places or people investigating haunted places, because I believe I said it before, I don't believe in ghosts at all, period, but I am open to being proven wrong. So if any of these videos can make me go, hey, you know what? Maybe there is spirits and ghosts still walking around out there. Coming from a Christian family, my father always said there's no such thing as ghosts. My grandma also said that. My mom also said that. So not believing in the paranormal is just kind of our family thing, even though I hear a lot of other believers say that they do believe in ghosts and hauntings and things like that. I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day. It was a short conversation, but you know what? We had a lot of information shared with each other, and he was explaining to me that he was Catholic. He definitely believes in God, Jesus, like I do, but he was talking to me about how he does indeed believe in the supernatural, and also not just supernatural, but the aura, because this is ultimately what him and I were talking about. How even though I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in demonic presences or anything like that, I believe that people do carry auras around them when, even if that person isn't inherently doing anything wrong, there's just something that seems off, and the brain just kind of goes, I don't want to be around that person. And it can go the other way too, of course, where you get a vibe of someone and their aura is more in line, and you go, you know what, I definitely want to get to know this person. And of course, sometimes these auras are wrong, where you meet someone that you never wanted to meet before, and it turns out they're an awesome individual and you love hanging out with them. And then there are other times where you say, I want to hang out with this person, but then they just turn out to be trouble. Because then we start talking about the devil, and I explained to him my view of the devil. As everyone knows, Lucifer is God's most beautiful angel. And how I discussed what he'd be like if he were to walk the earth, he wouldn't be a guy in a business suit. He wouldn't be someone who's really attractive. he'd actually probably just be a casual person like you or I. He would wear average street clothes because he would want to blend in with everyone else. You know what I mean? He wouldn't be inherently evil, at least he wouldn't behave that way. He would do sly, subtle things to make people do bad things, to make their lives worse and worse. Because similar to the Screw Tape Letters, have you ever read that? There's a moment where he just kind of goes, why don't you just go to lunch? He'd be subtle. He'd be quiet. He wouldn't be in your face. Not a big dude with horns. Not even the most glamorous model on the planet. Just an average person lurking in the shadows. Just watching and waiting.
So tasty. Eggs for supper.
Some good fucking food.
So for my seventh day of my horror movie marathon, I'm watching a movie called Frankenstein Unbound. And I had it confused with a different Frankenstein movie. This movie is much more bizarre than I was expecting it to be. I thought there's another Frankenstein movie I wanted to watch, and I thought this was the movie, but I think it's another one. This is like a time travel movie, which I'm actually digging. John Hurt is always good in everything, and Raul Julia is in it. We shall see how the whole movie plays out, but so far, I'm pleasantly surprised. And this is the monster. Very creative. Ouch. The acting in the movie is overall really good, I have to say that. So I kind of had a pseudo Frankenstein double feature because last night I watched Frankenstein meets the Space Monster, which has a surprisingly lack of, Frankenstein in it. Monster or, the monster or the actual doctor named Frankenstein. As a Frankenstein-like creature in the movie, but the creature isn't actually Frankenstein. But like I said, I kind of had having a pseudo Frankenstein double feature without realizing the Del Toro reimagining of Frankenstein is coming out later this month. So, kind of a happy accident. So far, this movie is more of a science fiction fantasy than it is a horror movie, which is fine. It's not bad, but just know what you're getting into before you press play. Like I said, more science fiction fantasy with horror moments than it is than a more of a straight up horror movie.
So now that we're done with our horror movie marathon, at least for the day, I wanted to talk about slasher films. Now, I was originally going to watch a movie called Peeping Tom because, I have the thing. And it was just a little too long. The 20 minutes that Frankenstein Unbound didn't have, that this had, that was an hour and 20 minutes. This is an hour and 40. It was getting pretty late, so I just wanted to watch something a little bit shorter. But this was the inspiration for what I want to talk about, which is slasher films. Now, this is considered one of the proto-slashers. Came out in 1960. People describe a slasher as a movie with a body count. There's Peeping Tom as a proto-slasher, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Psycho. And some people even consider Black Christmas to be a proto-slasher, even though that's more just blatantly one. But one that people don't really talk about in terms of early examples of slashers is Blood Feast. This came out in 59, so it means it was definitely in production before Peeping Tom was. And this is not just the first, potential slasher film. there's probably been movies before that as an example of a movie with a quote-unquote body count with either a monster or a person going around killing people, but we're talking about like a very specific subset that we would define as slasher, which some people define as they use like a bladed weapon, but I just consider it as like a movie with a killer, or could be more killers, that have a high body count. And this one doesn't really get brought up in topics of conversation when it comes to early examples of slasher films. Like I said, it's not just like an example of an early slasher, it's like one of the earliest examples of a gore film. And whether or not it'd be considered the first gore film is up for debate. But it is definitely one of the earliest movies to have high amounts of bloodshed. Whether or not the bloodshed effects are good and still hold up today is another conversation. But I think this is underappreciated when it comes to the history of horror films. It's definitely worth watching. Here's the thing, it's not that long at all. It's only 67 minutes. You can get done with it. You can watch this 3 times in the amount of times it probably takes to watch one movie in theaters today. But I haven't seen Blood Feast yet. I don't know if it's probably on Tubi, but definitely give it a look. It's a lot of fun. My best friend and I, Tyler, we would watch this a lot. I even seen the sequel, Blood Feast 2, and there's even a spiritual sequel called Blood Diner, which came out in the 80s. Blood Feast 2, All You Can Eat, more plays off the fact that it's more of a horror comedy, not trying to be a straight up horror film. And they actually did remake Blood Feast in 2017. I haven't seen that yet, so I don't know what the quality of that is. But I still need to check it out one day, hopefully, because it didn't look too bad. And then another one that doesn't really get brought up, at least I think this would be a great example of a mascot slasher, and that is Coffin Joe. Not really brought up in early examples of proto slashers. Like these predate this doesn't predate like something like along the lines of, like I said, Peeping Tom, because these did come out in the mid 60s, not so much the early ones. But for a mascot slasher, Coffin Joe should be up there with one of the earliest examples, I can't think of a better word, for that type of character. Definitely great movies too. I love the Coffin Joe series. The main line is just 3 movies, but there's also spin-off movies that feature the character that I haven't seen all of them yet. But the 3 on that set, if you can find it, definitely worth checking out. Great for Halloween time. The first 2 specifically, awesome Halloween atmosphere. Like it is so cool. It's so eerie, so unnerving, surprisingly really violent, especially for its time. This is also around the time with Night of the Living Dead when movies were pushing it. Blood Feast predates that, like I said, because that came out in '59, so it had much more, and that had even more blood and gore. But that had slash elements, had torture elements, cult elements, had all that stuff. High quality films, high quality. And another movie that was like the example of why I want to talk about slashers a little bit is Clown in the Cornfield. Oh, I had a lot of fun with this. This was a spectacular movie. The one thing I think is weird about it, and you have to watch it to really understand what I'm saying, it kind of feels more like an action film than it does a horror film. But you have to see it to understand what I'm saying. It is obviously a slasher horror film, but there are moments where I'm just like, okay, this feels more like an action movie than it does a straight up horror film. And it is more on the lighthearted side than it is truly scary. It's, of course, over the top violent. But clown horror films are all the rage lately, which isn't a bad thing because clowns have inadvertently become creepy because of it. And I think even without it necessarily, it'd still be pretty creepy. Because you have Terrifier, you have Stitches, you have the movie Clown, which was directed by the guy who made Spider-Man Homecoming, by the way. Pretty fun movie, too. But there's also a really underrated one called 100 Tears. If you want to see an uber violent slasher, clown slash movie that predates all of those, 100 Tears is the way to go. I'm pretty sure it's still on Tubi. I know the director wanted to make 200 Tears, but unfortunately that never got made because their Kickstarter or GoFundMe didn't meet its goal, which is a shame because 100 Tears, obviously, it's very independent, but It's charming, and it had a lot of potential to be a great film. It's still a solid independent film, but obviously you watch it, no masterpiece, but cult classic, and it predates, like I said, the ultra-violent clown slasher that Terrifier would become. I actually prefer Terrifier 1 out of all of them, by the way. Call me crazy. And just because I have it here, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, proto-slasher, even though, like I said, what defines a slasher is most of the deaths in that movie aren't done by slashing, they're more done by torturous methods, and there's only one chainsaw kill from what I remember. And the remake of it was all, and the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, mind you, was really good. The one from the early 2000s. The one with the girl from Seventh Heaven, I forget the actress's name, but I actually really enjoyed that remake. I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a lot of fun. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, I think, is really underrated, and people think I'm nuts for saying this, but I didn't hate Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. It's a weird title for a movie that's supposed to be a horror film, but I kind of liked it. I haven't seen many of the other ones after the remake, and also Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. I haven't seen any of the newer ones, not because I have anything against them, just that I never got a chance to watching them. And obviously the two big ones, Friday the 13th on Nightmare on Elm Street. I do have Halloween, the original one. I just can't find it anywhere, and I just want to make this video. Now let me get into some underrated slasher films. Now, obviously, I already talked about 100 Tears, which I said is the at least what I consider the proto-Terrifier. That's where the starting point of clown slashers, at least in my opinion, would be, because that was like 2007. I think I'm probably definitely wrong about that. But it was at least late 2000s to early 2010s when that came out. And that started the whole violent clown slasher romp. And obviously, we already had scary clowns before that. But another one, this is The Prowler. Now, I heard about this one because my one friend, he was actually talking about a movie called Maniac a little bit. And he said he preferred this one. Maniac is also another underrated slasher film. There's even a Maniac remake where it's all done from the POV of said Maniac, and I actually really thought that remake was cool. Some people didn't like it, even though I do think the hardcore Henry style of POV movie is the better one. Well, mostly because that's just more entertaining. But the Maniac slasher remake was really good. Maniac and Prowler are both kind of on the same camp for me. I think with Maniac and that awesome shotgun scene, he runs up to the hood of the car, blows off Tom Savini's head. That's an outstanding effect, and it is so fun to watch. Just watching the clip out of context is a lot of fun. And the Prowler, though, I think there's just something more, I don't want to say enjoyable about this, but, and what do I mean by more entertaining? I mean more so like, this is just more the fun slasher. Obviously there's dark moments in it, it's a horror movie, and the plot is still overall dark. However, Maniac is more of a character study, and a depressing one at that, about a guy who lost his mind, is just on a rampage killing people. Whereas The Prowler, it's more your fun slasher film you'll watch with your friends during a movie night. If your friends like horror movies, that is. But another one that's a great example, I think this one actually, over time, has kind of gotten a better reputation, or not, maybe not better. I think it's always been highly acclaimed, is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That's actually my favorite of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. It's that one, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the first one, and Freddy vs. Jason, if we can count that. But New Nightmare, it's the meta movie. It's Freddy the demon coming alive, coming into our world, and just murking people. He's not cracking jokes. He's still scary. He's being threatening throughout the whole movie. And to see her go through that in the real world and have to face this demon that she fought in the fake world is what makes that movie great. I will never not praise Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I think, like I said, that's my favorite of the entire series. And obviously he made the Scream movies. I haven't seen any of the new ones yet, but I heard everyone really likes them. So I gotta give those a try. Those look like a lot of fun. I've only seen the first three. I can't believe I haven't seen Scream 4 yet. Obviously the first Scream is my favorite one out of all of them. That is another great, isn't that a great, like, friend movie? What I mean by that is like a movie you'll watch with your friends. That is like, that's just a great hangout movie. I mean, it's such a cool movie. They parodied it in Scary Movie. They parodied that and I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I still have to see that Legacy sequel that they made recently. They also made a TV show. And did you know that was based on a book? The book isn't a horror story from what I remember, though. But anyway, slashers. And if you want to know what my favorite slasher movie of all time is, check this out. It's a movie called The Burning. My all-time favorite slasher, without a shadow of a doubt. It came out around the same time as Friday the 13th, and everyone thought it was a Friday the 13th ripoff, even though it was in production before Friday the 13th. So it's kind of like a case of a happy accident. And even still, like, even if it is similar, like, taking inspiration from something doesn't make it an automatic ripoff. I mean, Friday the 13th in and of itself was inspired by Halloween, and Halloween was, I think, if I remember correctly, supposed to be a sequel to Black Christmas. So, I mean, obviously it's not a sequel to Black Christmas, but the original idea was they were going to make a sequel to Black Christmas about Halloween. So everything does come from somewhere. So taking inspiration from something is not wrong. It just depends on how much of it is just a ripoff and how much of it is truly inspired. And I think the kills and the gore of The Burning are also really cool. And the "you're dead" at the very end of the movie still gives me chills down my spine. The Burning, like I said, that's my all-time favorite slasher film. I just love that film so much. Underrated, I think. I know it has a cult following now, but underrated. I think that's a topic worth discussing. Yeah, I'd say it's underrated because, you know, you got your Friday 13th, your Halloweens, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, but hardly anyone brings up The Burning anymore, when I think it should be brought up much more often. And speaking of, like, I'm going back to Nightmare on Elm Street real quick because I want to talk about favorites in the series. My favorite Friday the 13th movie is actually Jason Goes to Hell, particularly the unrated version, because I love how gonzo it is, and the gore effects in that unrated version are awesome. And my favorite Halloween movie is actually Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. No Mike Myers. It actually, at least that one feels like actually Halloween. And here's the thing, my mom took me to see the Halloween 2018, and you know what, we both had a lot of fun watching it, and I just wish the series would have ended there. I don't actually hate the sequels. I think Halloween Ends is a great idea in concept, but I think the character's name is Corey. He needed to be introduced much earlier on and not just he's there for that story to really be effective. I think that would have made the movie much better. I know, keep in mind, I still really enjoyed Halloween Ends. But like I said, that needed to be started from the beginning so that way we could get to a much more emotional story with that character. I think those movies deserve a second chance, just a second look. Or maybe even like you could have Halloween Ends be the first one, and then you can make a couple movies after that. But I think they deserved a second chance because they're not that bad. Like, because I remember everyone was ranting and raving about them, and I was like, these are Halloween slasher films. They're still entertaining. And isn't that the point of a slasher, to be entertaining? I mean, they're also meant to be scary. And I think that's one thing that we can see from the difference between like action and horror. Because in action films, you're cheering for the violence and things like that because you know you want to see the good guy win. But in horror, you want the... Like, it depends, because there's some slasher films where they make the leads so unlikable that you don't care if they get killed or not. But more often than not, you're supposed to be rooting against the villain and for the teens or the heroes or whoever is in the movie. But, like, I think when it starts getting, like, the brain starts messing up is when action movies start having horror-esque violence and that can kind of mess with people. But where it's like the violence is much more depressing, but in an action film, you're supposed to be trying to feel up and ready, but then you start having more violence that's actually genuinely disturbing. That's when action films can start feeling like, oh no. So it is about a lot of it's up to perception and things like that, or interpretation. Oh, what a night. But back to slasher films. Now, like again, this whole idea of a slasher is very up in the air because it is just essentially a horror movie with a body count. And normally it is just one killer, but there's been examples of where there's more than one killer in a slasher movie. I mentioned one earlier, no spoilers. But I'm not talking about Scream, by the way. But even a movie like The Toxic Avenger, that is kind of in its own right, its own slasher film, because Toxie's not a bad guy in that movie. He is very much a good guy, taking out all the punk gym members. But he does it in a much more brutal Jason Voorhees style of way. It's not like a hero's journey where you have Toxie going in and taking on armies of bad guys. I mean, obviously they couldn't do that, the budget is way too low. But The Toxic Avenger is more of a superhero slasher than it is like, your Friday the 13th and whatnot. And then, of course, you have Terror. I'm basically talking about Trauma right now. But you have Terror Firmer, which is another slasher that they made, which I think is actually probably one of their best films. I mean, obviously they made Poltergeist, which is my favorite, but Terror Firmer is definitely up there in terms of like high quality trauma films. Like not just in the terms of like just being like a goofy trauma film, but in terms of like genuine filmmaking, that's a great movie. I definitely highly recommend Terror Firmer. Man, slasher films are really fun. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about them a little bit. Like I said, I was going to watch Peeping Tom, but that 20 minutes, man, that 20 minutes would have been a killer. I mean, it's not that much longer, but if you got to be up for work early in the morning, time isn't unlimited, so unfortunately. Now, anyways, slasher films. What are some of your favorites? Let me know. Like I said, my favorite slasher film of all time is The Burning. And I can't believe I forgot to bring up Cheerleader Camp and Sleepaway Camp. Cheerleader Camp is a cool movie. It's one of those movies, though, that it doesn't become a horror film until like the last 20 minutes, which is actually something I really love, by the way. And Sleepaway Camp, man. Here's the thing about Sleepaway Camp. I actually saw the sequels before I saw the first one. Angela. What a character. Again, like, would that be considered a mascot slasher? And I know they made Return to Sleepaway Camp, but I think there was another one they made after that. I think. Or they had a fourth movie made that never got released, and then they finally released that one. I'd have to look that up. But I haven't seen the Return to Sleepaway Camp because a lot of people said it's not worth it. But again, if you really want a good, solid slasher film, look up the movie Blood Feast, the original one, because that is, to me, the first official style slasher. Of course, like I said, there's stuff that came before that we could probably argue would be the first true slasher, but if you want a movie with knife kills and gore with a body count, Blood Feast has that in spades. Then you got, I mean, the director also would go on to make a movie called Wizard of Gore, but that's more of a proto-torture film than it is a slasher film. And then you got The Burning, which, like I said, I can't stress enough that that's my favorite slasher of all time. And Clown in a Cornfield came out this year and is definitely one of the most entertaining films I've seen this year so far. Then again, I haven't seen many movies yet. I still haven't seen Nobody 2. Like I said earlier in another video, I can't believe that was out of theaters so quickly. It's already out on DVD. I mean, that's not a bad thing. I can go grab it right now and watch it. But this is Christian Grey Autumn, which means Horror Films Nightly. Anyway, I got called tonight. Please let me know what slasher films you find are the best. Or not even the best, just ones you find the most entertaining. once that you grab your friends, be like, hey, let's watch this film together, and be like, heck yes, we're watching this slasher. Let's get the gore, let's get the splatter. And there's even some slasher films that don't really have a lot of gore that are still great. I mean, like I said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't that gory. It's not gory at all, actually. There's a movie called Just Before Dawn. Again, that's a slasher film that relies more on atmosphere than it does blood. And that is a creepy, creepy movie. Just Before Dawn, I can't believe I forgot to bring that one up. This is what I mean by videos, and then I think of everything at the very end. Isn't that fun, folks? Anyway, I do have to call it a night. For the third time, any slashers that you recommend, place them down below. Any other horror films you might recommend that will fit Halloween, place them down below. This whole month, I'm going to be mostly talking about scary things and horror and things like that. Like I said, Christian Grey Autumn, Halloween season. We're going to have a lot of fun this month, I know it. Anyways, guys, I got to go to bed, so I'll catch you guys later. Peace. Peace. Peace.